Don't like the lights, but it's camera time. Said take the picture, but you rolled your eyes. Now I'm mortified, you're still terrorized. Push me behind to get me from my better side. I wanna push you back, but that's all you want. Wanna wrap me up, I'm holding back. Trying to get me framed, throw me in cuffs. Said I attacked you, that's just a false truth. No need to argue, and yeah, I've had enough. You follow me anywhere I try to be alone. I find you there. There's more to me. Everywhere I try to go alone, I find you there. You follow me anywhere I try to be alone, I find you there. Oh, there's more to me. Anywhere I try to be alone, I find you there. I find you there.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to a new episode of Moving with Life. Today's the 9th of February. It's Wednesday. It's Hump Day, which is awesome. Thanks for joining. I'm going to jump right in like I usually do. What I've noticed is when people have started developing their followings, or they're doing like a live, especially like live on Instagram, live on Facebook, whatnot, they are kind of wait for people to come in, see people comment, and kind of, because it's more of a two-way conversation. For now, it's not like that's not the case. I'm using a specific program that also creates a little bit of delay. I'm very mixed about the delay because personally, I do like things in real time. In real time. I was saying double time. In real time, because then I feel like I actually understand the flow. And when things are delayed, because I even noticed it's not on the actual YouTube live, like on the broadcast like availability, you can create like a latency, and I guess people do that just so they're able kind of I guess it helps them kind of filter the comments, so it's not in real time face to face, but for them it allows them to kind of process the information, and it's like at least for me, I guess I'm technically not that experienced, so I still prefer things in real time. Anyways, we're here. I'm ready to jump in and get through today's episode as far as information and what's been on my mind. Starting with so last Friday, I was going to get my oil change, and I had already mentioned this actually Friday night as far as I was getting my oil change, and actually hold on. I don't think I found it. I didn't mention it last time because I think I mentioned the oil change. However, I brought up how I brought up an oil. Forgive me. I was getting an oil change Friday night or Friday morning. It was Saturday morning. That's why it wasn't Friday. So Saturday morning I was getting an oil change. I went to Barnes and Noble the other day. That's what happened. So I was getting an oil change, and I was sitting there, and like I had already posted like a video for that day, and main thing about the content that I'm trying to bring aside from the lives now, and it's kind of unfortunate because I think soon, not crazy soon, but I still have like weeks to go, but knowing what's coming up next and whatnot, I'm gonna have to figure out how to do this or to continue doing this. However, so again, I guess the other little like caveat side note I wanted to mention was, so I was posting content on Saturday. I think I was doing I posted like a TikTok video that I created, and then I think I was playing a song. I posted it, and I was there and I finished that. And I started listening to a podcast, and I'm waiting in line because I woke up at a decent hour, but obviously people I'm used to getting up, very very early to get oil change, but because I work so late. I allow myself to kind of start my day a little later. Everything's kind of back on track now. So I'm there waiting to get my oil change. And then I am like the next car up, I think. And then I start feeling like this like anxious. And because anxious and anxiety, they fall into the same blanket. I started feeling that. I started feeling like anxious. I'm like, man, like what, like what's going on? But also like, why am I feel? I did ask myself like, why am I feeling this way? And then I was like, oh, I wish I was doing this, and that. I like which includes like, oh, I wish I was coming with podcast content, or I wish I was making another TikTok, another video for a TikTok. And I'm like, man, like, and then, well, obviously at that point I was like, sit down, chill. Like, if anything, write notes, come up with notes for the next podcast, for the next live. Because the thing is that, and what I've mentioned before is, one of my fears is burning out, because I've done that before. I'm trying not to do that again, or I'd like my best to try to mitigate it whenever I'm getting close to pushing that edge. And sometimes, in order to not burn out, I do have to bring myself back and be like, hey, you need to chill for today, make notes, maybe do productive stuff that involve the podcast or TikTok or whatever content I'm trying to do, but you're not gonna do work today, because one of my agreements with myself, and I remember talking to colleagues about this, like 2020, beginning of 2021, where I was like, I'd really like to physically actually like work and do my things, generally Monday through Friday, and do minimal to nothing Saturday and Sunday. So this has been like an ongoing plan anyways. I never really talked about it on here. But anyways, because that all leads me to this Saturday morning when I'm getting my oil change, and I just feel like, oh, I wish I was doing this. Man. And what it all revolved me back to was just workaholism. At least that's what I'm labeling it. That's what I think it is. I'm not quite sure. I'm not constantly doing stuff, even though it might seem like it, depending on when I post and when I do certain things. But I am always thinking, I'm reading, I'm not always, the thing is, I'm not always doing what I perceptualize, right? But my brain, does work. Just, it feels a lot of times like it's just constantly working. And that's why I've started writing down my notes, writing down my thoughts, and because I'm just putting it down so that when I look over it, it's like, okay, what's important, what's not, what can I throw out, what can I keep, what am I going to keep for the podcast, what doesn't matter, what's going to help me, in my goals for life, stuff like that. So anyways, I just wanted to drop that little story because it just brought me to workaholism, and like, now I'm here, and like, okay, now I'm here to do the podcast, and here we are, and I'm glad to be back. And so a couple of things a couple of directions I guess I could go with. I guess I can start with just my conventional notes, thoughts for what's coming up. So Super Bowl Sunday's coming up. I'm pretty stoked. I'm going to have to work, but I'm hoping to still be able to see the game here and there. Personally, I mean, Matthew Stafford, I think, deserves a win. I think he deserves a Super Bowl. He's definitely proved himself. And it's not, being on a overall better team. Now he's here in the seat, and he does deserve it. But if the Bengals won, I think I mentioned this the last time leading into after the AFC Championship and the NFC Championship, where it's like the Bengals, they pulled off a great upset. So how great would it be just the cherry on top and get the Super Bowl ring? Either way, it's even hard. In my head, it's hard to actually try to go for the underdog. I'm just looking for a good football game. I want to be back and forth. I'm looking forward to the halftime show because I know like Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, they'll be on there. So I'm looking forward to how they incorporate all that music and all that, the old school music with the new school music. But for the game itself, there's gonna be a ton of commercials, which I'm personally not looking forward to. A few years ago, I felt like I was into the commercials. Like, I was looking forward to seeing what was dynamic and what was innovative about the commercials. And this year, it's like just give me a good football game. I think that's been one of my things for the past like 12 months. Is like, if it's a UFC fight, give me a good fight. If it's baseball, give me a good game. Give me a good series. If it's football, I want it head to head. I want not conflict, yes, but I want I want a game. I want something that is going to keep me in tuned. So that's that. Cryptos, seems like it's slowly creeping up, which is pretty cool. January overall just sucks for everything, you know. And the way I put it here is conventional stock limbo. So our conventional stock market, I feel like it just feels weird to me. The way it's nothing's wrong, but it feels like nothing's right. It feels like nothing right either. I don't know if it's because all the politics is going on right now, and everything just as a whole, everything conventional just seems out of whack. And so I think because of that, the stock market's like not doing too bad, but it could be better. And so we'll stand by to see. I mean, I think the thing I said last week or the last podcast I talked about stocks and stuff is like, you know, save your cash so that you can make a good buy on a good dip, which seems to be like it's happening. We'll see. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. You know, this is just me talking about my opinion, what I think is going on. Pure opinion, not financial advice. I guess I can jump. So I'll jump into the first point because there's 3 points that I have written down, and I guess the first one I can start with is I can give you a story, and then open it up because it made me think, and it's a podcast. So I was watching Your Mom's House, which is Tom Segura and Christina P. They had David Ross, I think, and he's come out. I can't remember. They made him into a blue man. It's an old movie from like the early 2000s. Like I think it's like a kids movie, but I can't remember for last minute. I didn't bother looking it up. However, I was watching the podcast because he has a special coming out. I think over the weekend it's coming out, and so I was watching the podcast because I hadn't heard his name in a long time because I only knew him as an actor. I didn't really know him as a stand-up comedian. So anyways, they're talking, and then Christina P's like, "Hey, can I ask you a question that I've wanted to ask you for like the past 20 years?" And one of the questions was, were you a good student when you were in school? And he's like, and the general answer for everybody that I've seen is no one's a good, or no, I'm not a good student. That's what I've heard from multiple people. Like, oh, in school I was the worst, blah blah blah. And then I started thinking. So as he was telling his story, like, no, I wasn't a good student and whatnot. I was like, for whatever reason, the question hit me, and I was like, was I a good student? And in my head, I'm like, because in high school, I think I graduated with like an 88 GPA. And obviously people, you know, valedictorians and all that stuff, they were graduating with like 102, 110, whatever their score. It was over 100 because you get points with like pre-AP and AP and all that other stuff. And then that got me down. So I wrote it down because then it got me like, oh, maybe I should talk about this because for one, it is a vulnerable moment. But it's like, then it made me think, what is a good student? Like the term good, and it's funny because I can incorporate Jocko and like everything I've learned, blah, blah, blah. But in this situation, it's like, what makes it okay? So it's like, I had an 88 average. The valedictorian had 100, let's say 110, 105, whatever. I don't care. Doesn't matter. So they had that. I had this. David Ross doesn't think he was a good student. And then it led me to think, well, what makes a good student? You know, like, are they well-rounded? You know, were they only focusing on school? Was it, you know, like, what are the characteristics of a good student? Like, if you were a good person, because look at the definition, like, okay, are we using good as in like, oh, if the higher your GPA, the better you are? Or is it, hey, if you're a nice person and you kind of got along and stayed out of trouble, did that make you a good student? You know, like your actions of verb, like, as a verb, you know, a verb of being a student, you know, a human being, and then being a student. So anyways, I kind of went down that rabbit hole in my head, and I wrote it down. I'm like, oh, I'll talk about it here and see if I unlock anything else. It doesn't seem like I do, or I can right now. Because again, it's kind of simple. It's like, well, I wasn't a bad student, and it actually, so there's this program back. I don't know if it still exists. It might not. But for first generation students that were potentially going on to college, there's a program called Avid. And in Avid, they taught you Cornell notes. And I hated Cornell notes because I hated how they wasted space. For me, it was wasted space. Because you had to put your questions on like the ledge or the side, and then you make your notes along with those questions. And at the bottom, you have a summary. But the way they made us draw it out, it's like we're wasting all this space. That's the way I saw it, and I always half-assed it, and to the tutors and whatnot that did have to deal with me in that aspect. It was I apologize now, but it's like, but still, it was never a good answer for me because I like using the paper, and I make lines, and I do make notes on the side, but it's on the edge, but it just pertains to that area, but for the most part, I like using the notes, and I have I have little lines that make breaks for me, so I can be like, oh, this is a separate idea. But all that, because tied into like, are you a good student? It's like, well, and then fast forward to now, freaking 15 years later, I'm like, well, I think I'm a good student in the sense that I like learning things. I'm learning and have continued to learn, especially in the medical field. It being so new. All these process, going back to the values that I've kind of created was process improvements and like no poor quality, or at least trying to minimize your poor, any poor quality work. All those things have made me better, better process improvement, faster pace of learning, being able to pick things up quicker. So it's like, okay, does that make me a good student? And now it becomes now are you a good student becomes a rhetorical question, because it's like, well, are you learning, or do you want to learn? Because now being 30, it's like, well, my learning hasn't stopped. I still feel like I am a student when I talk to somebody new, when I meet somebody new, I get a new boss, or I meet new people wherever I'm at. And usually when I'm in the actual situation in that very moment, I'm not thinking about how am I going to implement X, Y, or Z? How am I going to implement this theory? It's like, no, we sit back and listen, talk, or we don't talk. It depends. However it goes. But then time goes by a little bit, and I come back to my notes or my phone or whatever, and it's like, oh, what? And then I get into my theoretical like kind of mindset where it's like, oh, what did I learn anything from this person? And if I did, what did I learn? And can I do better? And so yeah. So are you a good student? What do you think a good student is? What do you think is the makeup of a good student? I think it's a good question. I think it's something that you can use, especially whether you're an actual school system, whether it's college, like a university, college, high school, or so on. But then beyond an actual school system, what are you still, if you're still learning something or how to do something, whether it's a job, you can learn to be a clerk or a nurse or a plumber, whatever. I still feel like, you are a student because you've never done that thing before, so you're learning. So then, because you're learning and striving to be better, does that make you a better student, or does that make you a good student? I think good is not the best word to be used, and when it comes to being a student, and especially when we're trying to teach our young minds and our young people coming up and growing up, or at least if we're going to be using the term good student, make sure we define it and tell them, hey, because the thing is, I guess I feel the judgment of not having all A's is a bad student, and maybe that's not the actual thing. Maybe that's not the actual case, but that's how. Because I was in the system where, like, the better grades you have, the better person you are, or they're kind of tied together. And now that I'm older, it's like, no, you can have grades, but if you're a great person, then you're good to go. Like, yeah, I'll have you in my shop or whatever. Like, that's the biggest thing now. It's like, and I learned this even before doing what I'm doing now. Where it's all kind of the same, where from job to job, and I was talking to a colleague about, like, I've done food, I worked in food, I work and like so I've done substitute teaching, gym trainer, now healthcare. It's like I've done all these things, and the person to person thing is the same, and at that point that's where you can ask people, oh, how. And that's another thing is like when you're in these jobs or whatever, it's like you're adults. You're not talking about school. And if you are, my opinion, but if you're out of school and you're still talking about stuff you did 10, 15 years ago, it's cool to reminisce, especially if you haven't seen people like, oh, dude, I haven't seen you. Or, hey, I haven't seen you in forever. Like how, remember when we did this in high school or this in math class or whatever. I think reminiscence is cool. And I love nostalgia. So don't get me wrong. I really like nostalgia. However, if that's like your foundation of your being 10, 15 years later, then I mean, this is my opinion, and for those that do watch this now or in the future, it's like this is strictly my opinion, but it's like, hey, those are years ago. I don't care. I'm not gonna ask you what your damn grades were. I might ask you how you liked your reading class or your math class or your history or science, or that can give me actually a better gauge of what interests you, but also like what's your approach to learning. Like when I meet someone new in emergency medicine, and I still feel like I'm new because like the people that I'm able to work with, they've been in for 10 years or they've been doing emergency medicine for 10 years plus, 20 years plus, but when I hear just a little bit of arrogance or a little bit of ego or this and that, it's okay. Let me see what I'm working with, and that's what I'm more worried about. Worried about, not, is it the right word? It's the one I'm more cognizant of. Cognizant is better than worried, because it's not gonna worry me. It's just gonna tell me where we are on this plane. Are we good to go? Can we work individually? Do we have to work as a team? What's the situation? Then we go from there. That's all more important than grades. And that's my opinion. If it ever comes to a point that I open up a business, I'm much more, again, prone to ask like, oh, like, especially if they come forward with like, oh, I have a 4.0 GPA, and I said, okay, cool. How were your interactions with professors or your fellow colleagues, or how did that go? Because the personification, the personalization is, for me, more important. The conversation is more important, and that's going to tell me how you're going to be, because you can be in the dirt shoveling cement or whatever, but if you have a couple funny guys or funny guys, girls, coworkers, period, the job may suck, but you're going to get through it, and it's a cool hang. When people aren't the cool hang, or if you're not the cool hang, because that's just as possible. I don't know you personally, as far as like having this one-on-one conversation, but you get to a point where if someone's not the cool hang, then it's not even worth being there. And so, anyway, I guess that's all I tie in, is like, because that's what. Are you a good student? It's like, well, what does that mean? I have no idea what that means. So yeah, are you a good student? I guess something you can think about, something that's worth pondering. And then to bring changing stuff now moving on from the stuff. So, student, good student, bad student. I think if you're a good person and your grades can be less than average or over average, but if you're a cool hang, then I think it's going to work out pretty good. So Joe Rogan, obviously all this stuff's still going on with Joe Rogan, and it's been crazy. And I've been watching podcasts, and they've been kind of going through it, as stuff has been coming out, whatever. And I talked about it. I gave my opinion about it already, like a week, like week and a half ago. Like I think it was Monday that I gave, when everything first kind of started developing. I'm like, I had to talk about it then, get it out of my system, and now we're moving on. So I was watching Joe Rogan episode recently, and I just wrote JRE next to it, because I heard it it was either Monday or yesterday that I heard this, and it was the newest episode, and because this comedian has his special coming up, So they're talking whatever, and then because they were talking about Joe Rogan's like talking about how we feel so far and how everything's going, and then the comedians were like, it's so crazy. He's like, because the comedian said people that are winning are not focusing negative energy and negative things on other people. People that focus on their thing, that's why they're successful, because they're focusing on the thing. They're not worried about putting other people down. They're not worried about tearing people apart or their lives apart or their well-being apart. And Joe Rogan agrees. He says something. He says yes, and then he starts talking about, because they were talking about focus generally in this little piece. And Joe Rogan said the focus I put on other people is to elevate them, i.e., having that guy on his episode. He's like, yeah, he has a special that just got, he's either just got out or he's gonna get released soon. But nonetheless, when Joe Rogan said the focus I put on other people is to elevate, and he meant to elevate that person, it's like, man, it felt so relieving. It felt so relieving, and it made me, because I feel like I guess I can feel like I relate to it, especially when people we have a off day. I've had off days too. I was talking about the last Monday I was recording live, where I had a late start and I just wasn't feeling myself, but I was still recovering, rest from the week from working and whatnot. But I don't know if it was the way Joe Rogan said it or knowing what he's actually going through on his life and his well-being. Maybe a mix of both, obviously, and then the negative things that I just see, period. People being rude and, because it's hard because, like, I try to stay as neutral as possible because that's the majority of your time that it could be. But you have your worse off days and you have your better off days. But again, the focus I put on other people is to elevate. So if you're not gonna elevate somebody or prop them up or say, hey, it's gonna be okay, and let's get through today and get back on the ride tomorrow, whatever the situation may be, the horse tomorrow. You don't even need to talk about anyone if you're not gonna elevate. I guess it's one of those super like easy things, but it's a simple thing, but it's so hard to execute on it. And it's like, man, and I'll go on it another day, but it's like, man, what makes me not what it makes sense. That's not where I'm going with this. But it's like I'm trying. I had a clearer thought in my head and I lost it, but because it has to do with elevate. It's like, how can we want to put down other people? Now, their belief things, and if we can get down to like the actual issue of what's going on, that's different. But when we're just constantly harping and putting down other people, and the majority of the time it's actually not that, because they even talked about that where, if you meet someone in person, they're actually a great person, or most of the time, the majority of the people you see anyways are your circle or your friends, your family, whoever's closest to you, and it's all generally positivity. It's all generally positive in your circle. You aren't having, and obviously now we can go on to like a deep left field thing of like, unless obviously you don't get along with your family, then you need to find a better set of people. Blah blah blah. There's negative little aspects that could be possible, but hopefully that's not the case. But I guess also, just because you're having a bad day doesn't mean other people should have a bad day. And so, and again, I'm just as guilty of like having a bad day and being like, being very irritable, whatever it may be. But I try, and if we can try to keep that part to ourselves and kind of deal with it, vent in the right ways through the right channels, doing in an efficient way. It's not going to affect your work or the people that are trying to lift you up. And I think that's totally different. But if the majority of the time, whether it's coworkers, whether it's family, anything like that, if our focus at first becomes like a manual focus to making it a goal, like, oh, I want to elevate my team or elevate my friend or elevate my colleague, my coworker, my family, my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother, whoever. If you make it a conscious thing, I think eventually we'll fall into a subconscious like action of like, hey, I hope you have a great day. Hey, we're here. Yes, it's busy. We're stacked with product or service or whatever. But hey, we're here. We get along, and we can make it through today. Cool. And the last, I was also trying to figure out how I want to tie in my last point to focus on other people to elevate. Over the past month, I'd say, and again, this isn't the majority of the time, but it's just an observation. For the negativity that does exist, which I think it'll be a Pareto distribution, so 80-20. It's being like causing 80% of the negativity. That's the general rule. I think we can use Pareto's principle for that, for this. But one thing that I came to a realization, I think sometime last week, but I hadn't put it down, so I didn't talk about it yet. Because it's something that I've been thinking about. It's like, am I sure about this statement? Like, how sure am I? And is it proper? And it's like, okay, I think so. So I put everybody. So I put that in quotes because obviously not everybody. It's just a blanket statement about what I've observed from people, whether it's people coming into the ER and them not liking their job, or people that I know in the ER that don't like their job, whatever the situation may be. I think everybody needs a job reset, or at the very least, pick up a new skill. That's kind of that last little bit, pick up a new skill, was kind of like something I came up with. I was talking to a colleague about this, and that's why when I was talking with them about it, I added the comma, or pick a hobby that you can just kind of engulf yourself with when you're not at work. Now, people have families, people have kids, husband, wife, blah, blah, blah. So everybody's world's different, right? But again, this is just an observation, and using the Pareto distribution, everybody needs a job reset. And I think people that completely dislike their jobs and never leave is because they're scared of the uncertainty that comes when you have to learn a new skill. Totally normal, totally, I think, probably even factual. But nonetheless, that's what I think needs to happen. Yeah. And again, this is just an observation because I don't have a plan. I don't have like, five things that you can do to do this. Like, no, I'm just observing and calculating, and doing this podcast actually helps me stay in my lane. But seeing my writing and then trying to create a flow. I was even talking to my buddy earlier. Like, when I come in here and I write these things down and I see what I got, it's like, okay, can I create a flow, and I do think, how's my flow going to go? Because I'd like it to be good, because without flow, then it becomes boring. And I'm trying to become less boring. I think that's another thing about like recording in front of a camera and having like my monitor and everything set up, is I see myself, and it's not for like the mirror of like, oh, I'm seeing myself. It is the mirror of like, okay, can I create a flow to make sense of things? Because the majority of it is selfish. The majority of it is me decompressing, unloading this information, these thoughts and questions, creating a flow, thinking of stories of my experience of my life, literally my life experience so far. Can I create a flow to help this make sense? And at the very least, if I can't make it make sense to you, can I make it make sense to me, so that I can move forward with my life and whatever else I'm trying to do. Trying to think if I have anything else. I wrote on the values that I've come up with so far, process improvements and OPAR quality, which I briefly talked about. But I think that's all I got for today. And I'd like to get into writing again to publish, not to publish, not something like a book, but like and I don't even know if a blog, but writing for editing. I think it's Cal Newport that talks about it. Is it Cal Newport? I think it's Cal Newport. Yes, it is Cal Newport because he writes and he doesn't have social media. Yes. So he had talked about, and I had mentioned Cal Newport on the last time, so I went live. But when you write, because in his case, his argument is that when you write, if you write with the intent of being edited by somebody else, being judged not on you as a person, but judged on your writing, it helps you grow and it helps you become a better writer. And it's like, oh well, that wait, is it? It makes sense. Maybe it was another podcast. Nonetheless, the principle is that if you write with the intent of being edited, because I think it was actually it was a YouTuber that I found. I think it was him. I don't think it was Cal Newport. I feel like in my head it was Cal Newport, but it might be this other one. Either way, let me just talk about the principle because now I'm screwing this up, and that's okay because that's the intent of like trying to have my thoughts together, or at least in some type of form or fashion. But then I come up with new thoughts, and then here we are, me rambling and trying to figure these things out, which is totally fine. It's actually okay. I'm okay with it. I'm bringing it out into existence. Nonetheless, writing to be edited. So I need to figure that out because it's like, well, who do I want to read my material? And if I do start writing again, because I've written, I write, but if I'm gonna go the route of like wanting to be edited or like being very pristine with my writing, because I think it's important to be pristine, as pristine as possible, but as clear as possible, because now it's in print. Now you can screen video this stuff too, but when it's on paper, it's different, and I do treat writing on paper differently than I do talking. It's a different medium. Brain for me works differently when I'm writing versus when I'm speaking like this. But all that this past 3 minutes or whatever ties back into, I'm considering starting to write again. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking about it. I'm reading Life After Google. It's a very interesting book, which I think this can be my last. This can be my last point of the podcast. I'm done with my verbiage for today, my writings for today. But this book is very, very interesting. Definitely going back to work the other day. I wanted to not put this book down, and I wanted to keep reading. But I was like, I need to take it chapter by chapter. Making notes. I'm writing, and most of my notes are just definitions of stuff that I don't understand. It's just words that I don't use in my daily life. So it's like I don't know what that means. I don't know. So again, some of it's just definitions. I'm on chapter 4 now, which is titled "End of the Free World," because again, right now the whole argument is what Google has done, what Google is doing to bring free stuff, but yet with a bigger psychological price. Really, is what I think it boils down to. But there's a couple of good passages here that I want to read. I may or may not talk about them outside of when I read them, but I'm going to read this first one, then we'll go from there. So, all wealth is the product of knowledge. Matter is conserved. Progress consists of learning how to use it. Newton's knowledge, embodied in his system of the world, was what most critically differentiated the long millennia of economic doldrums that preceded him from the 300 years of miraculous growth since his death. The failure of his alchemy gave him and the world precious knowledge that no rival state or private bank, wielding whatever philosopher's stone, would succeed in making a better money. For 200 years, beginning with Newton's appointment to the Royal Mint in 1696, the pound, based on the chemical irreversibility of gold, was a stable and reliable monetary Polaris. Some of it's not important. The more important parts of that first couple sentences, all wealth is a product of knowledge. Because and I remember talking about this with like Eddie and Brian. This was back in 2016, 2017, where you know when I started discovering, you know, that knowledge is power, but then as we started talking about, like, oh, knowledge is potential power, because theory is only as good as the writing it's on, but when you actually use it and bring context to it, that's when you get the real power, because now you're applying the principle, right? And so this here is saying all wealth is a product of knowledge. So then for me, it's like, well, if all wealth is a product of knowledge, and knowledge is power, you know, you still can't get power nor wealth until you use the knowledge. So it's really a math equation. That's what I like. I think that's what I like the most about this book, is there's a lot of mathematics. It's said that, hey, for this, everything's math. For this, everything's math. And it's like, math is math, and I like math, and it's strike a chord. You know, I found a bias in the book that's keeping me reading. So, anyways, so yeah, if you know, you can write a math equation. You know, wealth equals knowledge, and then knowledge equals potential power. And in order to achieve both wealth and power, you need to be able to apply the knowledge. Pretty cool. I those things made me kind of giddy, if I'm being honest. It makes me excited a little bit. So yeah, there's that. And the reason why it goes into like the little second part, the second half of the paragraph, you know, where 300 years of miraculous growth since his death, the failure of his alchemy. For 200 years, beginning with Newton's appointment to the Royal Mint in 1696, the pound, based on the chemical irreversibility of gold. So basically, I didn't know this. I didn't know that Newton was involved in you know, the gold standard, basically, because from the gold standard then come the pound, and that was really the first issuance of currency, and what currency had turned into up until now. And so I haven't quite gotten into. I think basically it's going to go into how Google and like these free things is essentially this is very untamable words, but bear with me. So Google creating a lot of free things, us having all this power technically by, you know, at the type of a keyboard, is going to be changing this next development, and the fact that blockchain is becoming a thing, it will be the next currency that you can actually catalog, which makes sense because that's what blockchain is. It's just cataloging transactions and contracts. I even read something earlier on the Morning Brew where there's a real estate company somewhere, I think somewhere in Europe, but they're basically making the real estate contract an NFT, and it's gonna be the first. I think it's gonna be the first one. That's gonna test. This is my words. It's gonna test the laws of what a sale of a house is, and then now with it being an NFT, it's like it's gonna change the whole thing, and we'll see what it turns into. But anyways, I didn't know Newton was involved in that. All wealth is a product of knowledge, so in order to, you can get wealth, but you have to use the knowledge. It's a product of knowledge, so that means product of knowledge equals wealth, but it also equals potential power, so you can't gain that. Anyway, I said that like 3 times. So in reading that, I was like, oh, interesting. And then I want to read this one. Yeah, just so it'll make sense. So I'm gonna brief over the previous paragraph and then go into, I guess the more important quote. So mathematicians gathered in, I'm gonna mess this up, Königsberg that September for a conference of the Society of German Scientists and Physicians to be addressed by one of the giants in their field, David Hilbert, himself a son of Königsberg and about to retire from the University of Göttingen. Hilbert was the renowned champion of the cause of establishing mathematics at the summit of human thought. So basically, this guy Hilbert was the beginning of what eventually led to like computer science and then algorithms. That's like the easiest way to brief and to keep it simple, because from there it goes on to a bunch of other stuff, and I'm not trying to touch all of it because again this stuff has all made me think, and there's a lot of words in here that I don't understand, because I don't use them in my daily life, but I've written them down. I've written definitions, so it's like I'm trying to understand this even as I'm reading this. Hilbert had defined the challenge in 1900 to reduce all science to mathematical logic. So making everything an equation. And then if you can foresee the sentence that I just said, reduce all science to mathematical logic algorithms. What algorithms do, that from what we know, algorithms are these long things that create systems that know what we want before we want it. So the instrument that mediates between theory and practice, between thought and observation, is mathematics. It builds the connecting bridge and makes it stronger and stronger. Thus, it happens that our entire present-day culture, insofar as it rests on intellectual insight into and harnessing of nature, is founded in mathematics. So here's just saying that everything's founded on mathematics. And the reason why I talk about that, because when I read the quote, this main quote, the instrument that mediates between theory and practice, between thought and observation, is mathematics. It builds the connecting bridge and makes it stronger and stronger. And this is his theory. This is the math that he had spent his lifetime basically on, to come down to this realization. He's saying that, hey, math, if you can put things into basically a math formula, then you can just make logic out of all of it, and you don't have to worry about emotion. You don't have to worry about the exact thoughts of the theory. It's like if you can take all that stuff out and just make it an equation from this equals to this equals to this, and you get your answer, and that's it. And that's what he wanted to do. That's why it says, to reduce all science to mathematical logic. So anyways, that's just a very, very quick glimpse of this book. I'll read. Is it this one? This one, because this is one I actually posted on the Instagram, and it just, when I read this, I literally finished the chapter just because I didn't want to leave a chapter unfinished, because then there's a likelihood that I'll not finish the next chapter. But when I read it, I took a hard 30 minutes break, and this was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I'm gonna take a break, and then I'll come back and finish the chapter. So I'll read this, and we're gonna get out of here for today. So now it starts talking about Gödel. Gödel was, I think, Hilbert's. Trying to see where they first mentioned him. No, Van Neumann was Hilbert's protege. So I'm trying to see where Gödel was first mentioned. Emerging as a Grim Reaper at the party of the 20th century, which is that mathematics conference, Gödel proved that Hilbert's, Carnap's, and von Neumann's most cherished mathematical goals were impossible. Not only mathematics, but all logical systems. Gödel showed in his paper, even the canonical system were fated to incompleteness and inconsistency. So basically, this guy Gödel found that there's just a bunch of inconsistencies in the whatever the equations were, in the logic of trying to bring science to logic and only logic and mathematics. But there was just a lot of space. There's a lot of missing parts. There's a lot of missing spaces. And so this is the part I want to read from Gödel. So Gödel proved that axiomatizing never stops. That induction, intuition must always be present. That not all things can be proved by reason alone, which is mathematics. You can't just use math only. This recognition would liberate von Neumann himself. Not only could men discover algorithms, they could compose them. The new vision ultimately led to a new information theory of biology, anticipated in principle by von Neumann and developed most fully by Hubert Yoki, in which human beings might eventually reprogram parts of their DNA. Which, when reprogramming parts of DNA, I was like, wait, what? I was literally like, wait. And you can see you can look at my Twitter, you can look at the Instagram, Andy_MWL. It just, I was like, when I read that, and this was 1932, 1933 when this was going on. It was early 30s. It was like between 31 and 33. I'm giving it, because they mentioned 1932, but I can't remember when exactly that part came out. But this is the 30s, way before the internet, way before, or a good amount before the first computer. But they were already talking about computing systems and algorithm, or the foundations of algorithms in the 30s. And that I think that alone just blew my mind. And that's where I was like, what? And with that, I'm going to stop here. With literally, I'm coming back to the podcast, but just the fact that they were thinking about it just blew my mind. I was like, okay, I screenshot it, I took a picture of it, blah, blah, blah. I sent it off to a couple people. I was like, read this. I'm trying to understand it myself, but it's crazy that they were already thinking about algorithms and computer science as a science back in the 30s. So thanks for joining me. If you're listening to this in the future, thanks for joining me. Doesn't matter. Maybe here somewhere you'll leave a comment or a subscribe or something, and we can start some type of two-way conversation. Because I think that's what I'm looking forward to once I find my consistency in being able to do either lives or just podcasts in general. I haven't been posting on like SoundCloud and like Spotify and stuff like that. I know I need to start that soon again. I just haven't, but I'm trying to do these lives and continue to document just my thoughts and questions in real time. So again, thanks for joining me. Take care of yourself. Take care of others. If you have a team, your family, lead from the front. Lead by example. Do your best. Try to keep your quality of work high. Find ways to make the thing better, the system better, whatever it is. Take care of yourself mentally, physically. It's important. You got to take care of yourself too. You can't put the mask on somebody else in the airplane if you can't put yours on first. So make sure you do that. Enjoy your Super Bowl Sunday. I'm going to try to. Like I said, I'm going to work, but I'm going to try to enjoy some Super Bowl Sunday. Looking forward to hopefully a good game, and we can talk about it come Monday. So yeah, with that, y'all enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully sometime soon we'll start talking about gaming and metaverse and VR and stuff. But until then, y'all have a good one. As soon as I get this working. Or not. What the heck's going on? Oh. Well, if I turn on the volume, maybe.